sold your house to teach you a lesson about respect, my stepmother sneered over the phone. The new owners move in next week. I smiled, remembering the secret meeting with my late father's lawyer. Good luck with that, I replied. She had no idea what was coming. Update 3. As the weeks passed and Dad grew weaker, I noticed Brenda's attention shifting from his care to his possessions. She began asking him pointed questions about his business, about accounts and properties. She became particularly fixated on the house. We should discuss selling Richard, she said one evening when she thought I was out of earshot. This place is too big for me to manage alone. Too many stairs, too much maintenance. We could use the money for your treatments. Dad's insurance covered his treatments, and they both knew it. The house was worth millions in Boston's hot real estate market. And Brenda, who'd come into the marriage with comparatively modest assets, clearly had her eye on the potential windfall. Not yet, Dad would reply weakly. Let's focus on getting better first. But we all knew he wasn't getting better. The treatments had failed to shrink the tumors, and Dad had decided to stop them, preferring quality of life over a slightly prolonged painful existence. During his final week, Dad insisted on speaking to me alone each day. These conversations were often fragmented, jumping between childhood memories and urgent instructions. The oak tree in the backyard, remember how we built that tree house? Harrison has the papers. Your mother's jewelry is in the safe deposit box, key in my desk. Harrison knows. Trust Harrison. I nodded and took notes, unsure what was delirium and what was important information. The night before he died, Dad had a moment of perfect lucidity. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and looked directly into my eyes. Madison, I need you to forgive me for Brenda, for the lost years, but know this, I've always loved you more than anything in this world, and I've done everything I could to protect you. Remember that when it seems like I didn't. I held his hand against my cheek, memorizing the feel of it. There's nothing to forgive, Dad. I love you. He died peacefully the next morning with me on one side of his bed and Brenda on the other. In that moment of profound loss, I thought perhaps grief might bridge the gap between Brenda and me, that we might find common ground in loving and missing the same man. I was wrong. While I sat shell-shocked beside my father's body, Brenda was already on the phone with the funeral director, planning a service that would reflect her taste rather than Dad's wishes. The funeral was exactly as Brenda wanted it. Elaborate floral arrangements Dad would have found excessive, eulogies from her friends who barely knew him, a reception at an upscale hotel rather than the intimate gathering at home that Dad had specified in the notes I'd found in his desk. Throughout the service, Brenda played the part of the devastated widow perfectly, accepting condolences with a practiced balance of dignity and visible grief. Yet I noticed how quickly her expression changed when she thought no one was watching. The tears drying up instantly, the look of calculation returning to her eyes as she assessed the attendees, likely mentally cataloging who would be useful to her moving forward. I stood beside her in the receiving line, accepting hugs from Dad's colleagues and friends, many of whom I hadn't seen in years due to Brenda's systematic isolation of my father. Several whispered to me how glad they were that I had been there for Dad at the end. How much he had always talked about me with pride, even during the years Brenda had kept us apart. Aunt Carol stayed close to me throughout the day, a buffer between me and Brenda's performative grief. Your father adored you, she reassured me repeatedly. Never doubt that no matter what happens next. I didn't understand what she meant by what happens next, until 2 days later when we gathered at Mr. Harrison's office for the reading of the will. Mr. Harrison's office was located in a historic brownstone in downtown Boston, the kind of dignified old building where generations of the city's legal and financial matters had been handled with discretion. The conference room where we gathered featured dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and a massive table that seemed designed to intimidate. I arrived early, wanting a moment to compose myself before facing Brenda again. Mr. Harrison, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, greeted me with unexpected warmth. Madison, he said, shaking my hand with both of his. It's good to finally meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Your father spoke of you often and with great pride. Before I could respond, the door opened and Brenda swept in, dressed in an expensive black suit that screamed wealthy widow rather than grieving wife. She was accompanied by a sharp-featured man carrying a leather portfolio, whom she introduced as her attorney, Mr. Daniels. The fact that she'd brought her own lawyer suggested she was expecting something contentious. I glanced at Aunt Carol, who had arrived just after me, and she raised an eyebrow slightly. Shall we begin? Miss Harrison said, once we were all seated. He opened a thick folder, and cleared his throat. This is the last will and testament of Richard James Reynolds, revised and signed 6 months ago with myself and 2 colleagues as witnesses. 6 months ago, just before Dad's diagnosis, if my timeline was correct. Mr. Harrison began with the standard legal preamble, then moved to the specific bequests. Dad's collection of architectural books to his firm, a generous donation to the Cancer Research Foundation established in my mother's name, his vintage car to his oldest friend from college. Then came the items that mattered most. To my daughter Madison Elizabeth Reynolds, I leave my personal effects, including photographs, my architectural drafting tools, and the family albums. I felt my stomach drop. Personal effects, that's all. Additionally to Madison, I leave a cash bequest of $50,000. $50,000 was generous under normal circumstances, but given my father's wealth and our family history, it felt like an afterthought. I could feel Brenda's smirk without even looking at her. Now you can watch the 4th part by pressing share and more.